We're on. That's it. No turning back. And we are live! Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn.
Hey.
Wow. That was very anticlimactic, Martin, I've got to say.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you all on board and to be welcoming in new faces this week. Very, very exciting. I am your host, Rabbi Nick, and for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the format, we are going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about the plot line in this week's Torah reading, and then we move back into our text that we have been progressing through, which is Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of Our Fathers. We finished the 5th chapter last week, which means we've got one more chapter to go, guys. Very, very, very exciting. I would hope it could take us a few months to get through this one, I imagine, if we're lucky. And then obviously we're going to have to think about what to do next. But for now, let's talk about Parshat Yitro. Why is this parsha named Yitro? Who was Yitro? So Yitro or Jethro, right? So Yitro was the father-in-law of Moses. And there's a parsha named after him, which is quite incredible when you think about it. There's only 6 parshiot in the whole Torah which are named after people. I'm sure you might be able to name some of them if I was to put you into that corner and invite audience participation for some of the parshiot in the Torah. We've covered one in the bigger picture already. Noah. And it was, pardon me? Noah. Very good, so that's one. And we've also got Chaye Sarah, which is another one. We have Yitro. We have Pinchas. Thank you, Martin. We have Balak. And we have... What do we have? Wait for it. We have got Korach. That was it. We have Korach. So we have Chukas, Balak, Pinchas. We have Noach, Chaye Sarah, and Yitro. And it's amazing, really, because to have a parsha in the Torah named after you, and when you look through this list, you've got people like Balak, who was wicked and also not a Jew. And you have Korach, who was a Jew, but wicked. And you have Yitro, who was not wicked and not a Jew. It's very interesting, isn't it, that 3 of those 6 portions are named after people who are either wicked or not even Jewish. And yet they get their name in lights forever.
Who actually named them? Because originally, of course, I don't think there was a break. They just lay in different parts on Mondays and Thursdays. But it wasn't King James then?
I'm not sure is the answer to that question.
Was it in the Talmud that the Sedras were renamed? Or
it does come up somewhere that we divide things up. I just don't know where the exact source is. But
no, I just
nothing happens
like King James, which we do.
Yeah, I don't think it was King James who named our parashiot, and we have discussed in the past. We haven't got into it so much with the bigger picture, but we will in the months and years and decades to come. But the names do encapsulate a huge percentage of the theme of the parasha, and nonetheless, whoever came up with it, you've still got these people who are forever linked and tied to these portions. So Yitro must have been quite an interesting fella. He was Moses' father-in-law, and as we read in the story this week, he joins the Jewish people.
The Midianite priest.
Well, he was actually, the sources talk about him being a lot of things. He was kind of the first guy to try all religions, to try any religion that was out there. He had a long journey of searching for the truth, as it were. He was actually one of Pharaoh's advisors as well. And what we're taught is that there were three advisors to Pharaoh, three key advisors to Pharaoh. One was Yitro, one was Bilam, and one was Job, Eov. And when, I think this is probably Midrashim, but they talk about how when Pharaoh decreed that he was going to wipe out the Jewish babies, so each of these three individuals had three different responses. So Bilam got on board with it, and that's why he kind of maintains his evil character, taking us right the way through to the story where he is asked or hired by King Balak to curse the Jewish people. You've got Eov, who we're told remained silent, and as a result of that, that's why they connect that to the suffering that he encounters in the book of Job. And you've got Yitro, who was also a key figure in Pharaoh's court, and he chose to run away, and he escaped Egypt at that time, and that was kind of the start of his journey to becoming a righteous individual, to the point that he becomes this Midianite priest living in the sticks. Moses ends up in his house, marries his daughter, and he goes back to Egypt, leaving the family behind. Moses goes back, he takes out the children of Israel, they go to the Red Sea, they cross the Red Sea, and it would seem that all of this commotion, all of these miracles, all of the amazing things that are happening to the Jewish people, that is what triggers Yitro to come and join Moses and the Jewish people. And so that's where our story picks up, with Yitro coming to join the Jewish camp. And it's interesting because one of the first things that he does is he says to Moshe, you're working too hard, you've got to learn to delegate and to share responsibility and to share the leadership and to share the interaction that you have with the people. And he develops a leadership system whereby instead of having one chief rabbi that everyone goes and asks questions to, they appoint other leaders, other rabbis, other people capable of answering people's questions. And that leadership model is talked about in this week's Torah portion. The other big piece, of course, of this week's Torah portion is the giving of the Ten Commandments, the Jews reaching Mount Sinai, and a few days later having a revelation from Hashem. And we've definitely talked about this in the past, but with the estimates that there are 3 million people in the Jewish camp at least, all of whom are camped around Mount Sinai, all of whom are directly hearing Hashem communicate with them. This is why we would call it the national revelation, the only religion who has ever claimed that every single one of its followers has heard the voice of God, unlike other religions which will have started from a couple of individuals or one individual claiming to have heard what he heard and then managing to somehow transmit that. We're the only religion to have claimed a national revelation where everyone would have experienced it, which is amazing. It's amazing. So we have the 10...
Can I ask just a short question about that point? I heard that many times, but still, the story of the whole people hearing the revelation comes from one source. That source can claim a dream or an historical event. We don't have any historical evidence from all the people that was there that there was that revelation.
We don't have a source from the people there, did you say?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Yeah, well,
I'm not affirming anything because I'm totally unlearned. But my problem with that argument is that we say we're the only religion to claim to say that there was a revelation where the whole people was there. Other religion says, "Oh, I dreamed about something, and therefore I convince you about this." But still, I don't know where we get the source from, because it can be one man 500 years after that saying 500 years before all the people hear this revelation. So we're back on square one. We're exactly the same as the others.
I can see where you're coming from. I think, and this will, I think this will take each person to reflect on in their own way. But we've talked before here about the chain of transmission and the way in which we're able to identify individuals that trace our story all the way back to the Jews in the desert. So it's not like we have a gap in the chain where a story picks up 500 years after it's happened, and
I'm saying I'm not stating anything. I'm just asking how it is. Yeah.
Well, it is a common question to that particular point, but I think the way that I look at it is that the strength of our logic and the strength of our claim is the fact that we have an unbroken transmission, an unbroken chain of ancestry that takes us all the way back to Moses and the Jews in the desert. I think Shira writes about it in this week's newsletter. So if you read her Devar Torah, you might see this as well. But
I will.
The concept of 3 million people being able to then pass on a fabricated claim is statistically.
I'm not saying that 3 million people passed a fabricated claim.
Yeah.
I'm asking about the possibility, and again, I'm not making a statement. I'm totally unlearned, and I don't want to sound offensive or anything. I'm asking about one guy fabricating the whole story 5 years after it happened, 500 years after it happened. Now, you tell me there's an unbroken chain. That's a very good answer to that. And I will read Shira, and I will look into it. My question was that
we do accept Torah min Hashemayim, that Hashem gave us this, and it infers in the Torah, I don't know chapter and verse, that all the people heard.
Well, that's this week's parasha.
The Torah wasn't written by somebody 500 years later. In our religious belief, the Torah was given to Moshe there and then. It wasn't written by an individual, so it's a matter of accepting it or not.
The experience, I guess, that the weight of the logic is that the experience that would have been claimed about in this biblical document, for want of a better word, it will have been difficult to fabricate, because if you were going to say that the children or the grandchildren are receiving this document, and they hear that their parents or their grandparents or their great grandparents, whoever it was, stood at Mount Sinai. So, if they were to turn around and say, "Well, I've never heard that before," so you could maybe say one family never heard it before, another family maybe never heard it, but to say that 3 million families, so to speak, all decided like, oh, I guess we just go along with this now because this is what we're being told. That the premise is that it would have been impossible for such a claim and such a claim
a massive historical event.
Yeah, to have been passed through generations without anyone at some point kind of saying, hang on a minute, I wasn't there, he wasn't there, he didn't hear it, she didn't hear it, my grandpa's never told me that. So the fact that we haven't reached that point would also lend to the fact that this is something that won't have undergone that kind of scrutiny.
Right.
But yeah, there's
definitely a controversial question. I'm just trying to learn.
This is what it's all about. You're in the right place. Your questions are welcome, and the discussions are welcome. If you want to hear controversy, we're going to go over to Paul now. Go on, Paul.
I wanted to bring out that as we read through this, we see that our leaders and our Rabbonim were the same type. In fact, the Rabbonim were leaders. They led, and they led in political terms. They led in all sorts of leadership roles, albeit that all their decisions were hopefully based around Torah law. No problem with that, but they were leaders. I think it's a terrible shame that our Rabbonim now have decided, for no reason that I can actually see, that they want to be teachers, and that a rabbi is a teacher, not a leader. And I think
you silenced yourself.
You've somehow gone quiet for that last bit. You got to a point about them becoming teachers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's better.
Yes, we
can't hear you.
I'm not censoring you, Paul. Your question is welcome.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, but you're not on mute.
You're on mute.
No, he's not on mute. There's something happened.
No, it's something to his system.
Do you want to try and log out quickly and log back in again?
Can't hear a word you're saying.
It's not a sign from above, Paul. You've just got to come back in.
Can you do sign language?
Or do a chat, actually. Yeah. May I respond to it says Santiago, right? Santiago.
Santi, please. Yeah, Santiago only my wife when she's really mad at me.
Okay. We've been taught all throughout the generations that the Torah was passed down orally, and we talk about the oral law, and it wasn't for a long time later that it was written down and codified. So you just have to, I think you just have to believe, really. It's, if you read the Bible as a story, if you read the Torah as a story, it's one way of reading it, but you need to be taught how to read it, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And
there's definitely a lot of truth to that. Just to flesh one. Sorry.
I do understand what you say, and I've been reading it with several rabbis throughout the years and the decades, and different people in different countries, and trying to understand it. I think it also comes to the type of person you are and all that. I'm a deeply agnostic person. Deeply. So nothing to do with atheism. Okay, agnosticism is not atheism. It's just that I don't know. I don't have the information. I don't know. I have no way to make logical judgment on things that I don't have proof of, or I don't know. Being agnostic is saying that you don't know. It's not that something is not or is. It's just that I don't know. And I know I will never know. But it just I find intellectually stimulating to ask the questions and see how different people see it, because I learn from everyone all the time. So if you tell me that you've been taught how to read the Torah in a way that you can understand it better, that can be a trigger for me to try to find that as well. So I'm learning all the time, but I don't know, it's the way I am. I find it very difficult to accept things I cannot have proof of.
That's fair.
And I believe in God, by the way. I'm not an atheist. But it's just that I question everything all the time.
Keep it coming. It's healthy. Just on Joy's point, by the way, we do have the written Torah, which is the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, etc. And then the oral law is, as you said, transmitted orally over many years until eventually it was compiled. But we always had also the written text as well. It was just there's a lot of obscurity and a lot of need to understand what those written verses are saying. But we have always had a written text ever since the Jews received the Torah. But the examples that we brought in the past, things like tefillin. So we don't know what tefillin is supposed to look like just by a superficial reading of the verses. The information of what tefillin looked like and how you put it on, and et cetera, that was transmitted orally until eventually it was written down. But yes. Okay, Paul, is your microphone working?
I have no idea.
Yay!
Yes, we can hear
But
you.
I have to tell you, Rabbi, if that was not a sign, then I don't know what is. All I was saying, and I know it's not a long one, was to make the point that where Rabbonim used to lead, Rabbonim have decided more recently to teach. And I think it has not helped our community at all that they've taken that decision. And I regret it. I just make the point. I'm not actually sure.
I thought our Rabbonim led us as well as taught us.
Yes.
I'm not sure where you're coming from, that they used to lead.
I think rabbis do
now they teach and not lead.
Don't you think that part of leading is teaching? A very important part. And we have recently politically seen how someone that cannot teach, you cannot lead. But
everybody can't be a leader, and rabbis have always taught. From time immemorial, rabbis always taught.
No, we're just listening now and learning how rabbis led. The rabbis as they came out of Egypt, I mean, going down the road a little bit from there, but they did lead. They made very, very political decisions. Now we have everyone from chief rabbis onward who absolutely will not touch it with a barge pole. They are absolutely clear that a rabbi is a teacher, and I just think it's a great shame.
It depends what rabbi you come across. I'm afraid I'm pleased to say I do know rabbonim who take a very strong political view, as long as it's based on Torah law, that will speak against a political decision that is, say, against natural justice or against charity, or and will speak about it. So many rabbonim, I'm sure our rabbis, both Rabbi Nick and Rabbi Inkelon, if something was unjust and was being perpetuated by a political party, they would have the courage to say this.
I'm not arguing that point. Yeah. I'm just making the point that it is in more recent times that our rabbonim have gone down this teaching route.
I don't think so.
I regret it. It's all right.
I think to do with political circumstance in the country states that we live in. We don't live in a small desert environment where people can lead through the Bible, the Torah, or whatever. We live in sophisticated political times, and Rabbonim have their place within their congregations. But we have democracy.
How many people?
You may have mixed up a few different things there. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Come on, move on.
Maybe we'll come back to this. Maybe we'll come back to this after the recording's finished, because I would be interested to hear, try and understand more of what you're saying. I would like to try and understand more of what you're saying. I would say that, just as an instinctive reaction, I was wondering if you're going down the kind of perspective where, if a question is asked, not enough rabbis feel empowered to answer it. Perhaps they kind of take it up the chain. And I don't know if that's the kind of avenue that you're coming from or not. But
I think that is there, but for another time.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll save it for when the recording's finished and we have the after party on Zoom. Okay, so what was I going to say? Oh yeah, 10 Commandments. That's basically the rest of the parasha. Okay, let's move on to Pirkei Avot, chapter 6. Again, oh no, that's the wrong configuration. This is the right configuration. Lovely. Okay, so what you're looking at on the screen, if you are new to Lunch and Learn, is the text from a website called Safaria, which has got a huge amount of Torah texts that are available digitally. It's an amazing resource, and there's some incredible things that you can do with it. A lot of these texts come with translations, and when I scroll down the screen in a minute, you'll be able to see as well the English translation of this particular Mishnah. But just a couple of introductory remarks about the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot, because it's not without its not controversy, but without its need for explanation. So it would seem that Pirkei Avot, the chapters of Mishnah that we have been studying over the last few months, years perhaps, is actually only 5 chapters long. Right, the text that was compiled into the formal Mishnah text by Rabbi Judah the Prince was only 5 chapters long. And it seems that around the 4th or 5th century, we added on this 6th chapter, and there could be a number of reasons for this. One of the reasons mentioned in, I believe, the 9th century only, is there became the custom of reading these chapters between Pesach and Shavuot, right? And so they added in these additional statements, these additional lessons as a 6th chapter, so that they could flesh out the amount of material which would be covered between Pesach and Shavuot. And the style of what we're going to see is similar to what we've been talking about. These will all be statements from rabbis of around the same period, all who are sharing important lessons and important morals and important teachings. But it would seem that it's not actually the original text of the 5 chapters that kind of got sealed, as it were, into the Mishnah. So this was added later. And it's known as the chapter of Kinyan HaTorah, the acquisition of Torah. And that's also another reason why it was kind of, I guess, inserted into the lead up to Shavuot, because Shavuot is also building up to the time where we mark the giving of the Torah, and therefore we're preparing ourselves to be appropriate vessels and appropriate recipients to kind of what's the word? Not imbibe, but internalize and receive Torah values and Torah teachings. So whereas the first 5 chapters were about moral and ethical character development, this chapter is about the beauty of the Torah, and that's why it's known as the Kinyan HaTorah. And again, it's got the there's enough familiarity to it that it will sound like other things that we have been talking about as well. So the general message, the style, all of those kinds of things will still seem familiar to us, but it's important to know that this has now been accepted as a an integral part of Pirkei Avot, but it wasn't part of the original 5 chapters that made it in. So let's have a look at chapter 6, Mishnah 1. Okay, so
we can't see it; it's very small.
You can't see it; it's very small. And if I go like that,
that's better. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah, much better.
Excellent.
Before we start, can I just ask a question? I read in my book it was between the 7th and 11th centuries that it was first introduced, and we still say it today. But I've never known it. So when is it said? Is it still said every Shabbos?
No, on at Mincha.
At Mincha,
in the afternoon service between Pesach and Shavuot. And actually we have the custom of continuing it until Rosh Hashanah. So throughout the summer as well, we're repeating the cycle. And yes, this is included at that point in the service, which is why maybe you didn't see it, because
never heard it because I never go.
We don't get the same crowd at a Shabbos Mincha that we do get on a Shabbos morning. So there's some introductory remarks that is brought in the text. And it's in your English as well. So the introductory remarks are Shanu Chachamim B'Lashon HaMishnah. So the sages taught this chapter in the language of the Mishnah, which is what I was saying, that it's along the same style, it's coming from the same time period. And then it says Baruch Shebachar Bahem Uva Mishnatam. Blessed is the one who chose them and their teaching. And this is interesting. It says B'Lashon HaMishnah, in the language that you teach. There's something to be said for maintaining consistency, maintaining a familiar voice, and maintaining nuances that are familiar to people. There's another amazing thing just to consider before we dive into this. Baruch Shebachar Bahem of a Mishnatam. So blessed be the one, i.e. Hashem, who chooses or who chose these people and their teachings. There's an interesting point of reflection, because as we've talked about, sometimes we see these rabbis and they pop up only once in the Mishnah, either here or in other places. There's something to be reflected on with the people who end up throughout our history being the ones to deliver a particular message or to bring something unique or something very individualized or something very one-off into the world. And I was thinking about this recently when sorry, Joe? When someone was talking about Steven Spielberg, because Steven Spielberg is a world-famous individual who has created dozens and dozens of world-famous movies, has contributed so much. And someone asked a rabbi, why didn't Hashem kind of create him as a religious Jew? He could have brought Jewish films to the world. He could have done so much to revolutionize the Jewish Torah teaching through his creativity. And the answer that this person gave, and again, it's not an answer to the question, but it's just something to think about, isn't it? He hasn't lived his life as a rabbi, as a teacher, as a leader, right, Paul? He hasn't lived his life that. He's contributed so much, but when I think about his life, part of the legacy that he will leave behind is not just Jurassic Park or Indiana Jones, but it's also things like Schindler's List, which was revolutionary media for the world and incredible Holocaust awareness. And the outgrowth of that film was the interviews and the recordings that he did, taking down the stories of hundreds, I don't know if it got to thousands, Holocaust survivors. And what if we end up looking back on his life and saying, all of that was worth it because of the things that we did get out of him that really did help propel the Jewish message and the Jewish legacy forward. And that, I think that's quite an amazing point of reflection with loads of different people who, their message comes at a particular point, and you never know where these things are going to come from, but it would seem that there's some kind of, the time to shine for everyone. Every individual has the moment where their message is brought to people around them, and it becomes so crucially important. And sometimes it can happen in a very small way, where you give a piece of advice to somebody and years later they say, you'll never know how important that was to me, that time that you took for me. You'll never know just how much that comment helped. You'll never know just what that introduction, when you introduced me to your business partner, what that ended up doing for my business. You'll never know that pass away comment mentioning that guy around the Shabbos table, that girl around the Shabbos table, meant that I ended up meeting them and marrying them and building a family. We never know what will grow out of the small things that we do. And when I see Baruch Shebachar Bahem of Mishnatam, blessed be the one who chooses them and their teaching, I think that this is so it starts us on a never-ending rabbit hole of seeing how far that goes, that we get chosen at one point or another, and we never know when our message, when the thing that we contribute is going to have an impact on someone else. And sometimes that's huge, like Steven Spielberg, but more often than not, it's the way in which we interact with people around us. And I think it's quite cool. Wow, okay, you can say that publicly, Gary. Unmute yourself and tell us this.
The foundation that Spielberg started has got over 50,000 recorded testimonies.
There you go.
Of survivors.
That's amazing. That's a staggering number. Martin.
Yeah, the reverse, of course, is just as true. That you never know the result of a piece of Lashon Hara or something you shouldn't say.
Absolutely.
The terrible effect it may have on somebody immediately or years later. And it's so important to, as we've learned previous chapters, to watch your words, what comes out of your mouth. It can be for good and it can be for evil.
Thank you, Martin.
I think
absolutely.
that, Martin, what you're saying is absolutely spot on. And younger generations, especially younger generations, should be educated on that. You know, Rabbi Nick, we witnessed enormous tragedies a short time ago because of younger generations not being aware of what their words can do. And I think that Martin's comment was really, really good.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done in that area. 100%. So let's take a look at Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says, and these are long Mishnayot, and Sandy, just to help you along here, sometimes the English is not as helpful to us as the Hebrew. So
you don't have it in Spanish.
I could probably. I hope you can forgive us if you end up. This happens to
educated.
This happens to many of us where this happens to many of us where we ask a question on something that we read in the English, and it just happens to be that the language that they've chosen to translate this has created difficulties in understanding. So we do our best with what we've got on the screen, and we try and understand it from other places as well. So
it's lost in translation.
We often do get lost in translation. So let me try and take us through this. We've only got 20 minutes left on our time allocation. So says the Mishnah, says Rabbi Meir, whoever occupies himself with the Torah for its own sake merits many things. Furthermore, not only that, but he is worth the whole world. He is worth the whole world. He is called a beloved friend, one that loves God, one that loves humankind, one that gladdens God, one that gladdens humankind. And the Torah clothes him in humility and reverence, equips him to be righteous, pious, upright, and trustworthy. It keeps him far from sin and brings him near to merit. People benefit from his counsel, sound knowledge, understanding, and strength. And then it quotes a verse from Proverbs, as it is said, counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding, strength is mine. And the fact that it brings this verse is merely the biblical origin for how the Rabbi Meir would make this comment, that people benefit from his counsel, sound knowledge, understanding, and strength. How do we know? Because it was a verse in Proverbs. It bestows upon him royalty, dominion, and acuteness in judgment. To him are revealed the secrets of the Torah, and he is made as an ever-flowing spring and like a stream that never ceases. He becomes modest, long-suffering, which is going to be one of those examples of translation of the Hebrew. But Hevet Sanua, he will be modest, Ve'erech Ruach, long-suffering, which I guess is another word for patient. Umochel al elbono, and will be forgiving anytime he gets insulted. It magnifies him and it exalts him over everything. And again, over everything is a bit of an ambitious English phrase there. But umuromam to al kol hamasim, exalts him over all, I guess, actions. So we're going to go through this and try and unpack some of the nuggets that lie within. But is there anything that initially people may want to comment or ask about? There's a lot of
question.
Yeah.
At the beginning of all this, basically what they're talking about when he says that whoever occupies himself with the Torah for its own sake, it's like saying just occupying yourself on that just for the beauty of knowledge, just doing it in a pure way, not doing it with any ulterior motive. It's just knowledge for the beauty of knowledge, right?
Knowledge for the beauty of knowledge, or knowledge for the sake of connecting to our Creator.
Also, yes.
Not to make money out of it. That's, I think, to do it for the sake of
but it's not just money. It's
We will always see that there's multiple layers, and Martin brings out one. And go on. So what were you going to say?
Me?
I think I thought I interrupted you.
No. I was saying it's not even with the objective of bettering yourself.
Yeah,
it's just awareness of the beauty of the knowledge that is there, that is for its own sake, without any ulterior thing.
Could well be. We've seen other places.
It's even putting you in a second position. Is I want to be witnessing this beauty, this connection with God, and that's it. It's just pure connection and knowledge. That's it.
We have seen other places where there can often be a almost a causative reaction, that studying, you know, at the very least, certain areas of our wisdom will naturally have an impact and naturally improve our character. You know, certainly when it comes to Pirkei Avot, I put a remark that Paul has made on many occasions, where it's talked about, you know, what we might consider to be novel ways of looking at the world. And Paul will often say, why doesn't everybody learn this? You know, why do we not share this information with people? So we do see there will be areas of Torah study that just naturally uplift our moral compass. They naturally uplift our character. They can have an impact on the way that we look at the world. Joy?
I'm going to disagree with Santiago, because I think when you're reading Torah and occupying oneself with Torah, you are learning. You need to learn, but that knowledge does things to you inside, but you also, I think, need to teach it as well. So it can't just be an internal process. It has to be encompassing other people and sharing it with other people and helping other people with what you've learned.
It's interesting you say that. That's not... Sorry.
I don't disagree at all with what you're saying. I agree with that. I'm just saying that sometimes you just do that for the beauty of it, without it betters you, obviously, and then from a better place you can help better others, and you can even share it with someone. It's not just doing it in isolation, but it's just saying, well, for this, I was asking if this is the premise, is for this moment, all I'm concerned on is the beauty of the Torah and my connection with God. That's it. I'm not doing it to better myself. That was my question. I'm not saying you have to do that. It's just asking if that was the premise.
Whichever way round. It's a lofty aspiration, isn't it? And it's
yes.
You know, one can argue that you're already in a minority just by starting down that path, and we have other phrases that we see across the Talmud, like mitoch shelol lishma ba lishma, that starting something for the wrong reasons, right? Maybe there is incentive for you to be involved with some kind of Torah study. Eventually, it will lead to people doing things for the right reasons. You know, so you know when we were in Hale, we used to have a points system for people. When kids came to shul, they got points, right? So that's something. Well, they're doing the right thing. They're doing the thing that we want them to do, but they're doing it for the wrong reason. You know, so they're winning a scooter. That's not the right reason to. But one hopes that over time it has that effect on you, rubs off on you, so that you can move from a position where I'm doing it because of the fantastic dinner that is being put on as part of the talk, whatever, and then you're doing it because actually it's something that you enjoy and something that you want to learn about, something that you want to connect to. So I think...
Yeah, but I'm not disagreeing.
I'm saying you're not disagreeing.
I was just asking if the text was saying that. There was a question, nothing.
Yeah, no.
A judgment or a position or anything.
Yeah, I think you're right. That when we talk about doing something lishma, we talk about doing it for the sake of
it.
For the sake of it, or for the sake of Hashem, or for the sake of connection. So, but But then Joy was coming along to say that you've got to teach others as well. And it's interesting because one of the first things that we see in this Mishnah would seem to kind of perhaps cast a bit of a question on that, right? We say whoever engages in Torah study for its own sake merits many things. But then it says, furthermore, v'lo od, ela shekol ha'olam kulo kedai hu lo. That the creation of the entire world would be worth it for just one person who decides to learn Torah for the right reasons. So that you make a very valid point that it's important to share and that it's important to teach. But Rabbi Meir is saying is that the entire world would be worth having been created just for one person to come along and delve into God's wisdom. So that's interesting. And I think for me, a couple of the take-home points from these opening remarks is, number one, the concept of learning Torah lishma. We were talking about, Martin was mentioning financial incentives and all that kind of thing. There is an important point to consider, that often people go down routes of education because of what they'll get out of it eventually. So people will go and start degrees because they want to excel in their field. And it happens in the Jewish world as well. I remember a time when there was almost this peer pressure to produce a book. Who are you if you haven't written a book? Who are you if you haven't, produced something that can be shared with the world? But the cost of that can be that you end up with publications which are not of high quality, but there's this pressure that you have to have your name on something. Who are you if you don't have your name on the door? Who are you if you don't have Rabbi in your title? And so that as a society, there is big pressure to kind of make a name for yourself and for people to know who you are and to have things published. And all of the rest of it. But those are, I would venture to say, even though it exists in the Jewish world, those are not the same values that we would see from a statement like this. I've got a rabbi, in inverted commas, a teacher from the yeshiva that I studied in. His knowledge is encyclopedic, but he's never taken a smicha test. So has he achieved nothing? In terms of his connection to God, in terms of his encyclopedic knowledge of Torah, he's accomplished a phenomenal amount, but I would venture to say that he has done that, lishma. He doesn't want the recognition, he doesn't want the title. He does it because he loves it. Meanwhile, you've got someone like me who by comparison knows very little, but I've got a title before my name because, I needed that for my professional development, so to speak. And this is something that was coming into my mind when Paul was making his remarks earlier about rabbis and leaders, is that, you've got a lot of people called rabbi, but we are in no way of the same caliber as rabbis who have come before us. And there's, it's important for us to kind of maintain a perspective on that. And by the way, we could ask the question then, learning Torah lishma, what is an example of that? So there are many things that we could look at in either the Torah, the the Bible, or we could look at in the oral law. We could say, well, it's not relevant anymore. We don't have sacrifices anymore, so what's the point of learning about them? So there's an amazing thing here. There's a statement from the rabbis which says that if we learn about the sacrifices, in God's eyes, he will consider it as if we had brought them. So even learning about things which would seem to have no practical relevance, you still get the points in Hashem's eyes, and to such an extent that it would seem that spiritually it would be treated as if we had done those mitzvot. One could argue, I don't need to learn about the laws and the mitzvot pertaining to Kohanim. I can't ever do them because only a Kohen could do them, right? But it would seem that there are immense spiritual rewards just for learning about these things, even if they don't have a direct practical relevance, or won't practically change anything that we can actually do. Martin, were you going to come in on something?
Yeah, I just wanted to refer back to one of the other Mishnot that we learnt in Pirkei Avot, which this could be referring to, that although you are given the ability by Hashem to be cleverer, you can learn more, you can understand more, and even teach more, you shouldn't, maybe it means you shouldn't think that you're above people who aren't at that level, that you're doing it for the sake of learning and teaching and helping, but that you should understand you're no better than anybody else. You've got a blessing from Hashem that other people haven't got.
Yeah, very good. There are some incredible
just because you are a great authority.
Yeah, there are some incredible pieces of work. There are incredible books that have been written, and we don't actually know who the authors are as well. We've got epic works on Jewish law, on Jewish thought, on philosophy, on commentaries on the Torah, etc., etc. And first of all, the ones that we do know who the authors are, if you read their introductions, they very often kind of diminish themselves, they belittle themselves, and they're very, very humble in the approach that they have to wanting these commentaries, these explanations to come into the world. And it hasn't been about wanting to be the bestseller in Waterstones. It's been about trying to spread the word of God and trying to help people understand. But you've also got amazing things where we're not entirely sure who the author was. We don't know exactly what their name was, and that's interesting as well, because again, as a society, we often emphasize the importance of having our names on things, and the fact that we don't see that across the Torah world is quite amazing.
Can I ask just a short question, Rabbi Nick? You mentioned, and I heard mentioned many times about the sages of the past and how the Rabbanim of the past are a completely different level from any rabbi that you said were called rabbis, but we cannot compare to the rabbis of the. Why is it the case that Rabbanim from this age cannot compare with the past ones? What is different? I again, not judging, asking. I'm trying to learn. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, we have great political leaders in this age as we had in the past, or great philosophers or thinkers or whatever. Plato and Bernard Russell can compare. Why is it that is this perception that we can't have that high quality Rabbanim in this age?
It's a really, really good question. Wow.
Good luck with this one, Santi.
Yeah. What do you mean? Good luck me with this one, though.
Well, I think Rabbi Sachs.
I think fundamentally,
absolutely.
Rabbi Sachs was exceptional. Yes.
There are rabbis who are exceptional. 100%. There are, and there are rabbis who are of extremely high levels. Usually they're hiding away in Bnei Barak somewhere, or in Jerusalem somewhere. One of the initial things that strikes me really is that societal pressures change over time. Society changes over time, and the education system has changed over time. We saw a Mishnah a couple of weeks ago which talked about the milestones at which you should try and have reached particular levels of Jewish education. At the age of 5, you start to learn the Torah off by heart. By the age of 13, you should already know Torah off by heart. You should already know Mishnah off by heart, and then you can move on to the next stage of knowing things off by heart. And certainly it would seem the intensity with which a person can study Torah sources will have a direct correlation to the saintly levels that a rabbi could reach, or that a person could reach, and we don't really have that same opportunity, that same intensity, and the same environment that brings out that caliber of Torah scholar. There have been shifts throughout modern history that basically make it harder to study with that level of intensity, that level of seclusion, isolation, whatever other words it means, to kind of bubble yourself off as if that was the only thing that you were focusing on. And then the trade-off of that is you get people who are able to function well in the modern world, but they don't have that same wisdom and encyclopedic knowledge that people would have had in years gone by. Does that kind of answer the question in a fair way?
There was more tunnel vision in those days, that we didn't have to learn maths and French.
And there were fewer distractions.
Yeah,
there were fewer distractions as well.
One thing on your mind, and you learned it.
And you could have a singular focus where you could take a child from the youngest age right the way through to old age, and the only thing that they would see and the only thing that they would know is a Torah existence. And that's how you kind of get that kind of level. And we do have people who even in the modern, well, even in today's age, I should say, not in the modern world. The whole point is that they're very detached from modern secular civilization, but they do live in these cocoons, and they have reached these kinds of levels, and we do turn to them for answering our halachic Jewish legal questions, because they do have minds that are very well versed, not just in Torah wisdom, but actually they have a worldliness to them as well that allows them to answer questions, and important questions that help steer Jewish attitudes to things even in this modern world. There's one of the amazing stories that I was going to tell, which was of relevance to something that comes up a bit later in the Mishnah. People enjoy from him, they enjoy counsel and wisdom, understanding and strength. There have been great Rabbanim, great people in our history who, despite never attending academies and universities and all this kind of thing, they somehow still have an awareness that helps with things like medical questions. There are crazy stories that the Chazon Ish, right, who was one of the rabbis who lived early 20th century, right, people would turn to him for help with medical questions. And I'm not just talking about understanding medical ethical questions. There's one story that's told about him where the doctors could not decide what an appropriate course of treatment would be, and they went to him to ask what they should do. He asked for the options to be laid out in front of him to understand what the case was, and he was able to give a verdict based on Torah knowledge alone, without having ever attended a medical school. But yet doctors would still turn to him because of the worldliness that he had. There's other, in kind of more spiritual ways, there was a rabbi called the Baba Sali who was able to identify the location of a hostage without ever having set foot in the country. And he was somehow able to pinpoint the exact location of the person, give directions, turn down this street, go into this building, go up this many flights of stairs, right? Which was, he couldn't have known that knowledge were it not for his, somehow his connection allowing him to be able to do that. What were you going to say, Joe?
I was going to say that all these great rabbis and sages were usually Kabbalists. They lived half in another world. They studied yes, and only wanted to be close to God. That was their whole life and being. And a lot of this knowledge they acquired was because they had the knowledge and were pure enough and dedicated enough to reach other levels of spirituality, and they were given these things. That's how they knew. But they live today. I suppose there are people like that, as you say, hidden in Steve somewhere, but they were special people. They're
not in my house, I can assure you of that. Yeah. They're not in my house, I can assure you of that.
No, but I mean, these people, they dedicated their whole being to study and to prayer and meditation, and they only wanted to be close to God, and they were given insights. They had knowledge that ordinary people, in this day and age, couldn't acquire.
Yeah, let's try and wrap things up with just a couple of takeaway points from what we've been seeing here. So some things that have broader applications than just becoming a tzaddik, so to speak. So one of the things that we said is the importance for sincerity, the importance of doing things for the right reasons, not for your own power, not for your own political gain, not for your own wealth, your personal honor. And we see that a person who does these things lishma, right? We said it endears you to people. That's one of the things that it mentions in this Mishnah is that sincere learning will endear you to people, but also sincerity in any field will endear you to people. There's a point over here about Kamayan Hamit Gaber. It says that you will be like a fountain. A steadily strengthening fountain and like an unceasing river. So someone who studies Torah, it becomes like a steadily strengthening fountain. So perhaps one of the things to reflect on and to take away from this is that the point of the fountain is that it's constantly producing nourishment. It's constantly producing water. So even when you share that water with others, there's still more to come. And that's a point generally as well, that when we position ourselves to realize that we can contribute to others without it taking away from ourselves, that's a very incredible place to be. We obviously have our own reservoirs, and we had mental health awareness Shabbat a few weeks ago. We know that people's reservoirs of mental resources can deplete and can run on low or even run on empty. But when we are in an emotionally or spiritually strong position, which I think the mission is trying to draw out, as well as that Torah learning, Torah study can help with that. So when you are full, then you are able to share, and it won't deplete your resources, because it will become replenished and it will become refreshed. And there's another point here, and we really do have to kind of draw to a close over here, but it talks about umochel al elbono, that you are able to take insult without it affecting you too much. A person will become modest, a person will become patient and forgiving of an insult to himself, meaning that even when people criticize you, presumably as a result of Torah study, you will have a thicker shell, and you won't allow these things to penetrate and to get you down and to weigh you down. It will mean that you don't become overly sensitive, because when a person experiences life coming from an overly sensitive standpoint, it can become very debilitating. It can become overwhelming. So there's a point here about, I guess, also through effective Torah study, one can become aware of who they are. One can really get to know themselves, and one can really then learn how to navigate through life and not have to worry or not have to be overcome or overpowered when difficulties or insults or offensiveness comes their way. But also one can learn to rise above pettiness. One can learn to focus on relationships in appropriate and emotionally, spiritually, and physically healthy ways. Broadly speaking, we talk about this in terms of Torah study, that it helps fortify us. It helps build within us a foundation and a structure from which we will be able to go through life. But I think there's nuggets as well,
Yes.
and points to take away from this, and things to consider that extend beyond Torah study exclusively. But with that, given that the time is 1:10, we are going to end the recording and just continue with the after party on Zoom. So to all those watching on Facebook and YouTube, we wish you a wonderful, meaningful day, and we look forward to having you on board again with us very soon. To all of you on Zoom, let's continue the party.